So what is money?
A medium of exchange. Commonly accepted medium of exchange.
Why is money that?
I think, at least in philosophy, we picked a term and we applied it to some things. And then based on what we originally started using it to talk about, other things came to fall under it. So it's a socially constructed thing. There's no sort of scientific calculation that one could do to determine whether something's money. You can't run experiments on something to see. At least they wouldn't look like science experiments. They look like other kinds of experiments. Like you'd go and see whether people are using it as a medium of exchange. But we've got this term that applies to some things and doesn't apply to others, applies to some things at some times, but not at other times, applies in some regions, but doesn't apply in other regions to the same thing. So like if you're in Iceland, the krona is money. Here in the US, maybe not. So we have this thing that fulfills a role that we need played by something. And whatever plays that role counts as money.
Is there any examples of animals using anything as money?
No, I don't think so.
Animals ever trade?
They might barter one thing for another, but they don't have like a thing that is commonly accepted that they'll use to, trade other things.
The one thing I do know is that monkeys will pick fleas off animals and put them on themselves, and then they'll get other monkeys to groom them because they want to eat the fleas, but it's a way they get like a nice grooming. But that's
like
barter,
a good massage.
Right? Yeah, a good massage.
So the flea is barter, but not money.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you see monkeys collecting fleas and thinking, oh, you know what? I might want a massage tomorrow. So I'm going to get some fleas today, and then I'll be able to trade them for a massage tomorrow.
So it's an emergent human technology.
I think so, yeah. And it's done to play this role that, I'm sure you've had people talk about this before, but, if you make something that not everybody wants and you want something that the person who makes it doesn't want your thing, we need something that we can have in common to trade back and forth with people so that we don't end up acquiring a bunch of things we don't need.
And so who should issue money? How should money operate? Is there a philosophical line to that question?
I think there could be. I'm not sure that any philosophers, I think it might be the case that Andrew and Craig and I have come the closest of any philosophers to answering or trying to answer or even discussing that question. I could be missing some people in philosophy of economics. Certainly economists have been asking this question, for a long, long time. In philosophy, it would probably have to do with ethical questions. So there's no metaphysical or epistemological concerns, I think, about money creation and money issuance. They would be moral and ethical. For example, what gives people the most freedom? What leads to the most human flourishing? And then you can ask that about anything. Who should own football teams? Oh, there's a moral and ethical question to this. Should it be, local people, or should it be rich
Saudi
people?
Arabian government.
People, yeah. So you could subject the who ought to create money question to any of the tests that you could subject anything else to.
Why is it you lot care about money? What is it that's grabbing you about it? And it's a loaded question. I'll tell you why in a second.
Yeah, I can't speak for Andrew and Craig. For me, it's global inequality and inequity and people being born into positions where they don't have the ability, no matter how hard they work or what they do, to provide for themselves or their family and be able to engage in the kinds of projects that I think humans need to in order to flourish, whether that be art or music or something like that. There are way too many people who don't have enough. And the more I thought about it and the more I thought about the reasons why that might be, money creation and money governance is, I think, a big part of that.
So the reason it's a loaded question is I spoke to somebody yesterday and he'd written a book about inflation. I just put the simple question to him, why inflation? Why did you tackle that subject? And he said, I think it's the most important subject of our time. And I kind of pushed him on that. It's like, you mean any subject? And he's like, yes, it is the most important subject of our time of any subject is inflation. It has such a pervasive, it's caused such damage to society. It affects so many people for the benefit of the few, and nobody understands it, or a lot of people don't understand, or what causes it. He said it's the most, and I was like, you might be right. I've never questioned that, but I think you might be right. We've seen entire nations destroyed by inflation over and over. We talk about Venezuela and Zimbabwe, but we've seen it right now. We've seen it so recently with Lebanon. We're now seeing it in Argentina, for probably their 5th time in 20 years. We're seeing it in the UK, the US. We're seeing the catastrophic effects that inflation has to tens, hundreds, maybe even billions of people worldwide. And I was like, yeah, you're right. It is the most important subject of our time.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm not sure that that's true.
No, that's his, yeah.
Yeah. But if you could convince me that inflation is the reason for climate change and inflation is the reason for, global food shortages and people not having enough food, then I think, yeah, maybe that is so I think it's possible that something isn't the direct biggest problem, but is the cause of these other problems that are directly the biggest problem.
I don't think I can do the link between climate change and inflation.
I know people have tried, yeah. I'm not sure whether it works, but has something to do with it, inflation, incentivizing consumption and short-term thinking, and fill in lots of details.
Yeah. Maybe the design and nature of money, the design issuance of money would be a better, most important subject of our time. Mm-hmm. Because money affects everybody. And as you said, so many live below the poverty line, and there's so many incentives tied to how money is issued, operated, and inflation as part of that. Maybe just money is the most important issue of all time. You get money right, fix the money, fix the world.
Yeah, I think if you look at the things people need, which is food, water, shelter, clothing, we do all that stuff, or at least most places do most of that stuff with money. And if you don't have enough money, then you can't get enough of those things. And if you can't get enough of those things, then you die.
And the consequence of high inflation right now in the UK, you said food, warmth. Is it food, warmth, shelter, you said?
Food, water, shelter.
Yeah. I mean, we know people cannot afford to eat full meals. We know people are skipping meals now in the UK if they're particularly below the poverty line, or they're choosing to feed their children over themselves. We know people are losing their homes.
Heating.
Heating. We talked in an interview previously about warm banks. So we had food banks. We've now got warm banks. Mm-hmm. And this is all directly related to the difficulties in the economy and the pressures of inflation and rising energy prices.
Yeah. So one of my colleagues is Austrian, and he said there were places when he was growing up that you could go to for the day that were heated so that you wouldn't have to pay to heat your house one day a week. And those have come back now. They haven't used them for decades, and they're using them again this past winter and next winter.
Yeah, so we should be debating money more. It shouldn't just be, and it seems to just be locked in the world of Bitcoiners to this level of discussion or debate. I could be wrong. It could be, maybe it's discussed elsewhere. But I just feel like the Bitcoiners have really focused in on the nature of money, what it is, how it's issued, how it operates, what its role is, and the pervasive things that governments do to money.
I've talked to a lot of non-Bitcoiners, and when I introduce them to why I'm working on Bitcoin, I talk about these, what I think are moral issues with how money is created and distributed, and also how money is spied on and watched, and Visa and you get these stories about Target sending ads to people for products that they don't think they need, but it turns out they do need, and it intuited it based on their own. And so there are people that are watching our transactions. There are people that are blocking our transactions. Governments want more control, of course, always, not less. And so there are more and more consequences for purchasing certain kinds of things. The entire U.S. is somewhere between banning mifepristone, this abortion drug. So if you need to buy that, and you probably don't want to use a credit card. So they immediately get it. And every single one of them has said, I've never thought about it. I've never even considered that there could be a different kind of money, or that money could be governed differently. Now that I think about it, of course it seems obvious, but it just never occurred to me.